we have up is the Department of Education School Nutrition Program. Chief, good to see you back. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Dickie Shaner and Carla Banks with the Wyoming Department of Education. In our memo, we tried to sort of summarize all of the different federal school lunch programs that Carla oversees, in addition to her laying out some of the sort of challenges she sees across the state with school lunch programs and some of the opportunities as well. And she has 30 years experience in this space. And so, Mr. Chairman, we would just be happy to answer any questions you have related to school lunch programs in the state.
Any questions on this issue? You have to take a number. Plenty of questions there. Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some questions overall about access to the district-wide free and reduced lunch program. Albany County did that for the first time this year. How many of our districts statewide could be eligible for that if they went through the process of doing the paperwork and opting into it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, we calibrate every April 1st on that, the community eligibility program. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure how many, but I can certainly look that up. But we do have Albany, and Albany was really interesting because not all of their schools qualified, but they saw such a value in providing free meals for all the kids that they did something called CEP for some schools, and then they did something called Provision 2 for the other ones, because Provision 2 is another program that offers universal free meals. The families the first year have to do a free and reduced application, then they're good for 3 years, and they just claim on that percentage. So, but I can definitely get you that number on how many qualify but don't participate.
Chairman, and kind of the purpose there is if we do get to a point where the state is picking up some amount of money on nutrition, doing it from the standpoint of what's the most cost effective for the entirety of the district is obviously going to be valuable. And that program that Albany County is doing, and I don't know if are any others participating right now, Mr. Chairman? Okay, I'll ask you more about that in a second. Seems like a very cost effective approach from the state's perspective if we're trying to bridge the gap and ensure that everyone has access to lunch. So that will be valuable. And I'm not familiar then with Provision 2 versus the community program. Can you tell us a little bit more about the nuances to that second provision?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss. Provision 2 is for schools that don't meet that percentage. So to be CEP, you have to be 25% free versus on DC, which is direct cert, where you match with the SNAP, the Medicaid, the homeless. And so you have to be 25% direct cert, so you do not collect free and reduced applications. Then there's we call it the multiplier. You multiply that number times 1.6, and that's the number you claim your kids. So the magic number is 62%. So if your DC match is 62%, multiply that by 1.6, and all your kids get to be claimed at that free rate. So that is like the magic number where the whole price of the meal is covered at that higher rate. So Provision 2 is anyone can be Provision 2. There's no percentage that you have to match. There is a base year where you have to collect free and reduced apps. And then it's usually not, you don't get a super high reimbursement because it's a higher economic status program. So definitely can be done, but it is a way that the federal government is putting in some reimbursement, but you can feed all the kids free and still get reimbursement.
So my follow-ups on that is, first of all, do you think I'm correct in thinking that would be kind of the most cost-effective approach if doing that for as many districts, if not all the districts as possible, if we were going to take a state approach? I'll pause and let you provide comment there.
I do, because then you're leveraging the federal money, and you're getting that multiplier. The good thing about CEP is you don't have the expense of free and reduced apps and the administrative burden of that. So that is taken off the school districts. So, you re-up every year, you direct cert match. So everyone that's 25% or more gets that multiplier. I do think that's the best way. I know we don't want to compare ourselves to Colorado, but that's how Colorado does universal free meals, is that if you qualify that 25% or higher for CEP, you have to do the CEP program, and then the state comes in.
I see. That's helpful. And you said that there were other districts than Albany right now that are participating in the CEP and or this Provision 2 program. Can you provide a little more comment on what other districts are doing?
Well, Albany one is the only one that's doing Provision 2 right now.
Okay.
But we do have other ones doing district-wide CEP.
Okay.
Yeah.
And which districts are those?
Fremont, we have several in Fremont. Goshen, Goshen 1 is, I should know this, and
It's okay.
several of, I know Fremont 14, Fremont
38,
21,
maybe?
a lot of the Fremonts.
Okay. So we're talking less than a quarter, certainly, of the districts, but somewhere in that ballpark right now. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I think that's something for us to get more hard data on as our consultants are looking at possibilities of what we should do. That seems like a great path that we would want to explore from the financing side of things. If we were to take this on, then how much does it cost for a statewide program where we're basically bridging the gap of the costs of the school district to get to 100% using the community program and this Provision 2 program. So, Mr. Chairman, is that something that you could, work with us and the consultants on for next meeting perhaps, and try and get an understanding of that?
Yes.
Who else? Senator Schuler and then Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, if you have I don't know if you have an answer or not, but why do you suppose that some of the districts are not taking advantage of the USDA? Is it because of the federal guidelines? Is it just too many hoops to jump through? What's the reason for that?
What I hear is that it's a lot of regulation. I also hear that the older kids don't get enough to eat because we do have a meal pattern that has to be followed. I hear a lot about whole grains. 80% of the week's grains have to be whole grain. And in our state, we do like tortillas and whole grain pasta. But at 80%, you can still work those in because you have 20% of the week to work with. So those are the things I hear, but the ones that have not been on the program since I started, I don't know their reasoning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, Ms. Graves, is that correct? Sorry.
Banks.
Banks. Ms. Banks, apologies. We get a lot of names. So let's say I'm trying to figure out what the flip side if we don't take the approach that Senator Rothfuss is saying, where we centralize it all and we fund kids eating. If we keep allowing the districts to do it and then figure out how they finance it themselves, but we also want them to incentivize taking advantage of other sources of money like the federal grants, what is the administrative burden that we basically are decentralizing on all of these districts that they already, frankly, do probably for the ones that do apply? I'm trying to figure out, like, let's say we are going to fund school nutrition in some way, but we still have to fund the administrative burden that's the requirement for them to do those federal grants. Could you quantify maybe how many hours or how much is that a position worth just for that? Because I'm reading in the WDE report that there's, both leadership challenges and logistical challenges with managing school nutrition. So trying to figure out how we quantify that in a model, I think would be useful for us.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, that is a hard one because I was a food service director and I was in a bigger district, so I had more staff to do it. The administrative burden at the district level is free and reduced apps, turning in the claims, and managing all the people, because food service does require a lot of people. USDA does have something called professional standards, And that, and in our state, we're struggling right now with professional standards. I have to give a lot of waivers because we are not finding the staff that the professional standards say if your district's this big, your food service director has to have this kind of degree and this many years of service to be an actual director. We don't have the people in the state applying for those jobs. And so the administrative burden right now is we have people we have to get someone in that position, but they aren't coming in with the skill sets all the time. So I think that's a bigger administrative burden because then the business manager has to help out, because they just aren't up to speed. So, I mean, and I can give you all the professional standards that kind of spell out, and we also have guidelines in the industry that if you're this size of a district, this is what your director should be doing. If you're this size, then they should have these duties. And what they cost, I think that's a district decision. At the state, right now, we're completely federally funded for the administrative part of this. I'm the only one that's state funded because it's maintenance of effort. So at state level, it wouldn't cost the state any more administratively.
So, Ms. Banks, I'm going to take my hat off as co-chair and put my Senate Appropriations hat on. As you know, one of the programs that has been very important to me is the Farm to School program. We put in the biennium budget an allocation of $300,000. Tell me is that going forward now? Tell me what the status is on that.
Chairman Salazar, right now that 300,000, we did not get the federal Farm to School grant. We did not get that grant. So that $300,000 is going to go to fund our position. It's at an AWAC position. And so that doesn't we'll be really tight to do much programming with that money. It will fund that position to still work with the farmers and the ranchers to get those local foods into our schools, but we won't have much money left over to do a lot of programming because we didn't get the grant.
Well, help me out. What programming was occurring before that you won't be able to do now?
We held a statewide conference and we were able to do a lot of one-on-one trainings and stuff. And so we won't be able to do any of that. And we also had a federal grant for a while that we could buy local foods for the schools. It was called the LFS grant, Local Foods for Schools. So we were actually able to work with growers and stuff and buy food directly if schools wanted it, and we could pay for the food. So that will not be happening. And then we also were able to do some mini grants. So like, if a school wanted to put up a hoop house or something like that, or, do tire gardens or something, we could do that, and we don't have any of that funding.
So I would like you to keep me informed of what's going on there. And I would appreciate it if you would give me in the weeks ahead what the shortfall is on that to equate to what you had been doing in the past. And then I will go from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Thanks. Following up on that, I think that's an incredible program that we probably need to do more with if we can. The question I have relates to with the federal free and reduced lunch program and the requirements associated with it. Does that cause us problems with regard to procurement and access to our local farm goods, whether that's meats or vegetables or anything else? Are those programs, the federal free and reduced lunch program and our state farm to school program, do they struggle with each other at times? And if so, how?
Chairman Salazar, Senator Rothfuss, prior to you guys giving us the allocation of the $300,000, the farm to school coordinator was completely federally funded under the National School Lunch Program. So yes, so he could only work with school districts that were on the National School Lunch Program because the funding was federal to federal. But now that you guys have funded it, it does open up the farm to school program for us to work with all the districts.
So again, that is a program that provides food to our schools from local small business people, keeps those dollars within the community, is fresh food at a less expensive price than if we were to ship that food someplace out of state, correct?
Correct. The pricing kind of varies sometimes, but it definitely works with the small farmers, small ranchers. The meats are processed in the state, and then they're served to our kids in our schools. Absolutely.
So there was widespread support for that. It was the intent of the legislature to keep that going. So I would like you to keep us informed with regard to the progress of that. And then I'd like you to follow through with me and others on the Appropriations Committee
Okay.
on what the dollar amount of the shortfall is for you to pick up what you were doing before you were dropped on the federal side.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
Sorry to keep belaboring this, but you mentioned USDA facility in the state. Can you talk a little bit more about what our obligations are when we're sourcing meat? Again, complying with the feds for our free and reduced lunch program and USDA inspection requirements. How does all of that come together and what are our obligations there?
Absolutely. So for meats to be served in our schools, for a national school lunch program, we have to follow federal rules. And so all that means is that the animal needs to be processed in a USDA plant, inspected plant, or a state inspected plant. So if we have an animal, and animals can be donated to us too. One stipulation that we run into is wild game, because those are exempt processing plants, so they're not USDA or state inspected, but we can take goat, lamb, beef, anything. The school district can also buy the animal and pay for the processing with their USDA funds, with their meal reimbursement funds. So the only thing that we've kind of run into is our towns that are on the borders of the state, because, you know, they'll get them processed, say in Nebraska, because that's the nearest processing plant. But if the one in Nebraska is not USDA inspected, we can't serve it in a Wyoming school. So it can't be Nebraska state inspected. It has to be USDA across the border.
Just interesting if there's any requirements for chicken or fish. I'm assuming every once in a while they serve chicken. And right now legally, I can't process beef through a grocery store, but I could take a chicken at this table where I'm sitting and cut it up and sell it to you. So I'm just wondering if there's any special requirements for chicken for you. Thank you.
Yes, there would be. It would still need to be butchered according to USDA standards. And we don't get a lot of chickens. I know there is a lot of guidelines on fish, because the state of Alaska gets a lot of fish for their national school lunch program. So, I mean, we don't get any fish donated, so I'm not up to speed on those, but chickens is one I'm going to have to look into.
I'm almost positive that the USDA doesn't care about chickens at all.
That's strange.
Probably because a chicken is a $10 carcass and a beef's about a $4,000 carcass. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Banks, just one quick question for you. How many schools are currently serving both breakfast and dinner in the school year? And also, how many schools are currently serving during the summer? Do you have any of that breakdown information of who is actually doing what right now? And how many are actually serving through the course of the summer, if any? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Neiman. I know right now we have 88 summer sites, and I have I have it somewhere. I have a lot of numbers in my head. I don't.
Mr. Chair, I've got that in front of me. There are 41 out of 48 districts that participate in the school lunch program. 41 out of 48 that participate in the breakfast program, and you have to participate in lunch to participate in breakfast. So you can't do only breakfast. You can do only lunch. And then with the summer food sites, we have, let's see. Do you have that, Carla? So there's 20 out of 29 sponsors were school districts for this summer sun meals. And I believe there are just 5 counties that do not participate in that summer program. Is that accurate? So just 5 do not participate. The rest do the summer meal program.
Do you have the names of those 5 counties?
I do.
Can I hear them?
I can get them for you. I know it's Crook, Weston, Niobrara.
I'll pull it up.
And one thing I can add while Dickie's looking that up is during the summer, it's a lot different because you don't have to be a school district. So when you see on our sheet that it's 20 of the 29 are school districts, those can be community members like Boys and Girls Clubs. In Powell, we have the hospital that does it. So they don't always equate to school district numbers if those numbers look a little off to you.
Mr. Chair, the 5 counties without a summer feeding site are Niobrara, Lincoln, Hot Springs, Crook, and Weston.
Thank you. Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Banks, thank you for the information you put together in your little report here. I see the school breakfast program, the school lunch program, but I'm not familiar with the after-school snacks program. Could you give me a little clarification what that is?
Sure. So we have 2 after-school snack programs actually that we run. One is called At Risk, and it's run as part of the National School Lunch Program. You have to have the National School Lunch Program to be at-risk snacks. And to be an at-risk snack, you have to be 50% or greater free and reduced. And so that means that after school, kids are doing activities. There has to be a learning activity, but it can also be for the sports kids and stuff, and you can provide a snack. And those snacks are all provided to the kids at free. And so anyone can have them. And then there's also an after-school snack program under CACFP, which is Child and Adult Care Food Program. And it's for those schools that don't get to that at-risk level, but they can still provide snacks. And you can also provide suppers if you're high enough free and reduced. Mm-hmm.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman. Could you give me an example of what a snack, is it a granola bar? Is it a sandwich? So if students are staying for an activity after school, how does that work? Is it equivalent to a meal, or is it just a granola bar or a popsicle?
It is not equivalent to like a full meal. So we have 5 components: fruit, vegetable, meat, grain, milk. And you have to pick 2 of those. You have to serve 2 of those as a snack. So it could be an orange and a milk. It could be a peanut butter sandwich, which would be the grain and the meat. So it's only 2 of the 5 components. So it's not a heavy snack at all. It's not a full meal.
Okay, other questions? Anyone on Zoom? Speaker Nyman, did you have your hand up?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Ms. Banks, I just have one other question just for some clarification for myself. What percentage of the student bodies are actually participating in the lunch programs? Is there any kind of information out there, breakdowns of based on student ADM, what percentage of them are actually participating in the lunch and versus the breakfast programs? If you could have that information, please.
Yes, thank you, Representative Neiman. It varies. It drastically varies across the state. A lot of it's to do with the free and reduced rates. You obviously see higher participation in the free and reduced schools. And I actually do have those numbers, and I even have them drilled down to, I can pull them to say a high school, how many of the qualified free kids eat, how many of the qualified reduced kids eat, and how many of the qualified, well, they don't have to qualify, the paid kids eat. And it's just a huge difference across the state. I can say that right now about 33 to 35% of our kids are free and reduced. And our new year starts July 1st. So everything will change come July 1st.
Okay, any other questions? Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we get, I see some of the dollar values for like the food distribution program and the fresh fruit and vegetable program. What is our statewide federal funding that goes to free and reduced lunch, as well as like the entire school lunch program from the feds? What's the total value of that?
Thank you. So right now, I was just running some numbers. If it's breakfast and lunch alone, it's about $19 million. And you have to remember, we have 7 districts that don't participate with us. So we have 0 going to them. And then, so fresh fruit and vegetable program is a midday snack for elementary schools that choose to participate. And that you have to be on the National School Lunch Program to participate in that program. Our USDA foods commodities is about $3 million a year. And then we run the CACFP program, which is it's National School Lunch and CACFP. They're 2 separate programs. And that one is between $6 and $8 million a year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up on that. And I think it would again be interesting to see what that would shift to if we maximize statewide with the community programs. Do you have any guesstimate on that right now, or is that something we'll just have to get the data from you on later?
One thing I think I could give you that would be really interesting, that would kind of give you a good image on that, is during the pandemic, because we went to universal.
Yeah.
Everyone could eat for free, right? And the great thing about the state of Wyoming is we were actually one of the states that went back to school in the fall of 2020, where many states stayed out, right? And we were allowed to, by USDA, feed all of the kids free and no applications. And so I think it's a really good number that I could probably get you for that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, on that, when those are freely available, I assume the percentage of students that are taking school lunch when it's a default program, a community-wide program, I assume that goes up dramatically. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. It's interesting because we were looking at this like a year ago. Breakfast went up exponentially. Like during the pandemic, the kids that participated in breakfast, it was amazing. Our numbers went up a lot. Lunch, like over the whole year, went up maybe 100,000 meals. Like this year, I just calculated it for something else, but between breakfast and lunch in school year 25-26, we served over 9 million meals. So, and then when we were in the pandemic, it only went up 100,000 meals for lunch, but it went up a lot for breakfast.
Okay.
So it kind of tells me that the kids that want to eat at lunch are eating at lunch.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? Chief, anything else?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. We got a couple follow-ups that we'll provide to the committee.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Pikus, do you want to come up here and give us a review of and I'll let you go any direction you would like on this review.
Okay, thank you. So for this presentation, I want to do a little recap of some of the presentations we've given before on food service. We'll go over the court ruling, funding sources. I'll touch a little bit on the federal meals participation, but you just hear from the experts, so we'll be able to move past that. Recap again the difference between kind of expenditures and revenues. What do other states are doing? What are options for food service funding that we've raised so far? The new pieces will be providing some feedback. We held an additional professional judgment panel specifically on food service and did some follow-up interviews. So we'll share that information with you all. And then start to give some initial estimates for the range in costs you might see as you go down these different avenues for potentially providing support for food services. So the court ruling again was that districts should not be having to use their general funds to provide food service. So that they also found that nutrition is really an essential component of a child's education, a quality education. So that's grounding that. And the other piece I wanted to share that we haven't before is to give you a little sense of what food service operations look like. So this is coming from the department classifying how food services can be provided, ranging from convenience, which is the idea of you're kind of serving prepared food to students. Conventional is more the traditional preparing meals on site from either raw or partially prepared ingredients. Then there's some ideas around satellite cold or hot and bulk. And then I would say the other thing that comes up is in conventional is the idea of scratch cooking. So that's where you are really starting from those raw ingredients. So that's a subset of the conventional approach. So food services funding comes from a few different sources. The first being those federal reimbursements. As we've talked about, that's somewhat of a small piece of the pie. There's also state or local support that can be provided and revenues from paid or a la carte sales. So in school year 26, districts really range in how much they charge for meals between that kind of $3 to $3.50 per meal, varying by elementary or secondary. Okay. Hang on, I just closed that. Okay. So federal reimbursements, I think we spend a lot of time with the last folks talking about that, but you can see the reimbursement rates will vary whether a student is qualified as receiving free meals or reduced meals. You can see it also ranges by if it's a lunch or a breakfast. And then as Carla shared, there's also additional programs like those commodity foods and available resources above and beyond those reimbursements for meals. I'm clicking, nothing's happening there. There we go. Thank you. This was already touched on, this idea of the CEP, where if you have 25% or more of your students, you can qualify all of them to receive free meals. What comes up is that where's that sweet spot that was referred to of around that 62%? That would be where your number of direct certification kids multiplied by that multiplier means that you can receive reimbursement for 100% of your students. So anything between that 25 and 62.5% means that while districts can provide meals to all their students, they're not getting reimbursement for all of their meals. So the more meals they provide, the more the local is on the hook to pay for the difference. So we'll touch on that a little bit in the feedback as well. And I think this was already well covered. So this is just that chart that we've looked at before, the difference between food service revenues and expenditures over time. So you can see there's been a healthy gap between the two for the past 10 years or more. And the most recent information we have, so that school year 24, the difference was about 18 million between those two revenues and expenditures for food service. So then we've also gone into this a bit in prior presentations. What do other states do for funding food service? The vast majority don't provide any supplemental funding for food service. There are 8 states that provide free meals to all students, either a required program or something that they opt into. In addition to universal meals, there are some other states that provide supplemental state funding, either via taking what they would have received if a student was free and buying the difference between that and students that receive reduced, so covering it. So instead of receiving the funding for reduced, you get the funding for free, or providing some additional funding and incentives when they're trying to expand programs like breakfast. So again, most states aren't doing a lot, but there's a range in the states that are doing it. You can see here that these are the 8 states that either provide universal meals for all students or allow districts to opt into that program. So we've talked about a number of different ways you could think about providing some resource support for food service, ranging from the idea of putting staffing in the funding model, kind of with or without some funding minimums or staffing minimums by school, providing per meal reimbursements, or doing that kind of copay buyout of the reduced versus the free, or providing reimbursement, either to provide 100% universal meals or the gap after federal funding for either all your students or a portion of your students. And we've talked about there could be requirements around providing that support, which could include requiring participation in the federal meal programs or auditing of services and supporting that efficiency. Okay, so that's a bit of a recap of things we've told you all in the past. So new pieces are coming out of the PJPs and interviews. So in addition to the prior rounds of professional judgment panels that you heard about, we held an additional one specifically around food service. We also spoke with the WDE food service director and then conducted several different interviews with district food service staff representing a range of districts to hear more about how does operations look right now, what challenges do they experience, and get a little more of that on the ground sense of what's happening. So big picture themes, there was strong support for food services via a simple mechanism, either per pupil funding, staffing based. Keeping it simple was a key message that we got from the field. Universal meals were really seen as the ideal. They would love to be able to provide meals to 100% of their students. They questioned how practical that would be or possible politically. So providing funding for staffing was seen as kind of the next best alternative. Reimbursement models there was some caution around them because of the lag for reimbursement, the administration piece that goes into that. So there was less support for reimbursement. There was also talk about around that CEP participation. So while the threshold was reduced, that gap between what the participation they had and that sweet spot meant that it often wasn't financially viable for them to participate in the CEP program until they got to higher percentages of students beyond that 25%. They also noted that there can be some volatility in who's eligible from year to year and a staffing burden. So those were some of the reasons we were hearing that folks were not pursuing that CEP participation, even though so many are eligible that don't participate.
So those school districts that hadn't reached that 25% yet? Were they just using other financial mechanisms to feed those who needed it?
Yeah, Chair, you're correct. So while they might not participate in CEP, they were participating in the regular federal meals programs. They're charging for their meals. It was more so that they didn't take the step of going to CEP, where they'd be then required to provide meals to all their students when the math didn't quite work between how much they would receive in reimbursement and what they would have to pay for that.
So when we get to the public comment, I'd love to hear from some of our superintendents and schools on what they're doing on that issue. So please continue.
Thank you. And then we heard about kind of Wyoming specific barriers to that sustainability, the ability for food service to be self-sustaining or fully funded via what they can get for reimbursements and what they can charge. And they noted lack of distribution, high food service costs, staffing issues, storage limitations. So there was a number of reasons they felt they couldn't be self-sustaining, and why we're seeing that $18 million, for example, a gap between the two. Okay, so then more specifically on the operations, districts really varied in terms of how they're providing food to their services, with generally a mix between that idea of convenience cooking, serving prepared meals, and conventional cooking, where you're using a mix of pre-processed or raw ingredients. So everywhere was doing it a little bit differently, but those seem to be the two common ways that folks were going about it. Back to the conversation about participation. Participation varied across the districts we spoke with, and often varied by elementary versus secondary, with higher uptake or meals served in elementary versus secondary schools. Districts, as you can imagine, often face challenges getting staff, and typically they found being able to provide benefits was a strong way they were able to attract staff, versus being able to pay them an hourly rate that would be similar to what they could make at a fast food restaurant or something else that would be a full 12-month position versus just during the school year. Increased food service were noted as an issue, and that the federal reimbursement rate was not increasing at the same pace as food costs were rising.
So
Yeah.
let me stop you there.
Mhm.
So the feds are not making timely increases with the skyrocketing costs of food. Is that?
Chair, I'd say that's correct. When you look at the change in the reimbursement rate over time, it's gone up, but not at the same level we see the costs of food going up.
Okay, thanks.
And then they noted that they struggle with kind of statewide food service distribution infrastructure and having the sufficient space or cold service at their facilities to bring in more food at a time. So they're having to get regular deliveries that are hard to get in their areas. Okay, and then a little more feedback on the federal meals programs. So as we've heard, there's a number of districts that choose not to participate in the federal meal programs at all. And reasons they cite for that are the significant administrative burden of participating. There's also challenges around the rules that are required for the federal meal programs, and districts feeling like they don't meet the needs of their communities. They're a little too restrictive. Districts have noted that they've been able to either improve the food quality or reduce waste by not participating. And that as we talked about, that federal reimbursement is often below what the reimbursement rate is lower than the cost of providing that meal.
So what did you hear about the quality of the food under the federal program?
Mhm.
Is it that inferior? Tell me what you heard.
Chair, thank you. I think it's what we have heard is not so much inferiority as being a difference in what the kids wanted to eat versus what they'd be required to serve. And some of the restrictions on the components of the meal that had to be provided going to waste for that. But I think I'd welcome the district folks in the room to speak to that a little more, perhaps. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, please.
Following up on that point, in my recollection from years ago when we looked at this before was that, and I don't remember what the value was at the time, the $4.69 is not enough to buy in Wyoming high quality meal, and even regardless of the inflation, it really wasn't at any point in recent history sufficient to purchase a meal that was a desirable meal. Is that still what you're hearing? Just that the federal program, you almost immediately have to supplement, you know, maybe pay another extra $1 by the district to have a sufficient quality of meal to serve, and then they have to pick up the price tag even on the free lunch. It's not a free lunch. There's no such thing as a free lunch in Wyoming schools. Is that consistent?
Senator, I think that's consistent with what we were hearing, and I think is what we see when we look at, we'll get into it a little bit later, the data that we have on the amount of funding they're receiving from the federal government and then what they are actually spending per meal. I think if I'm remembering the number, it was just shy of, it was like 685. If you look at a per meal amount that's being spent, and it's a per equivalent meal, I can get into that, versus even that 470 at the absolute highest of what they'd receive reimbursement. But if you think of that reimbursement over all the meals they provide, which are not all free, they're also providing reduced meals and paid meals, that they're getting, I think it was about $3.65 per meal from federal sources. So there's a pretty healthy gap between that and what they're actually spending on food service. Thank you.
You know, I'm learning too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know, well, I know in some of the senior centers, they're charging $4.50 for a lunch, but I'm assuming they are not dealing with the federal qualifications of what must be in that meal for a healthy meal, a nutritious meal. Is that right? So that's why we're dealing with,
Yeah, Chair.
well, maybe they are, but
I'm
So,
less
I'm-
clear on what the requirements would be in that senior center. I know what the requirements are in, K-12, but I'm not sure to answer your question.
I mean, I know when I was in high school, I would love a pizza or a cheeseburger and forget the salad.
Mm.
But,
Yeah.
well, I think tomorrow, Mr. Co-Chair, some of us are going to try the federal meal and see what it's all about. So, but,
Yeah.
okay,
Thank you.
sorry to interrupt. Go
No,
ahead.
no problem at all. It's a great question. Yeah, yeah.
We're with you, Mr. Speaker, in response to Senator Rossfuss's question about the difference. I mean, notwithstanding that we've experienced in the last few months very real inflation in school prices that the federal system wouldn't have caught up with anyway. But I think the challenge in Wyoming has been the distances to provide the food, and then the lack of economies of scale. So that in larger school districts in large cities, they can afford to make it work with the federal reimbursement because they can produce, as Dr. Brown will show you later, there's economies of scale in doing the food, and there's access to more food options right away that meet the federal standards. So part of this is, I won't say it's unique to Wyoming. I'm sure there's plenty of other states that have exactly the same problems you have in terms of distances and small populations. But I think that's a big part of why the difference exists here more than in some other places.
Yeah. On that point, the 459, as I understand it, is the one price set for the entire country. Is that accurate? There's no regional differences. I believe that's correct.
Thank you. Relaying what I heard from Phone a Friend, Hawaii, Guam, and Alaska have a difference. Otherwise, everyone else is the same. Yeah. Okay. So I think we touched on that CEP participation. So on the flip side of that, we heard quite a bit from others that do participate that would argue that participating in the federal programs is critical for making universal free meals or expanded service financially possible, viable for the state. So mixed opinions on participation in the federal programs. Okay. So then we asked for some feedback on that range of different ideas that we've had around how might you provide support for food service. So first looking at per pupil funding or staffing component, there was broad agreement that at least having minimum staffing for small districts would be helpful. Providing staffing in the model would be essential. And that as you think about it, being able to extend state support for benefits to food service staff would be very helpful. Per meal funding was viewed as more unpredictable. It would likely require participating in the federal meal programs to compare districts fairly. There's a fair amount of data collection that goes into when you participate in the meal programs about how many meals are offered and things like that, that isn't required now of districts that don't participate. It raises concern over ongoing rising costs of meals, that if you set a per meal amount, next year it's going to need to be different, needing to keep up with that. Concerns around the reimbursement were that payment lag. Without standardized accounting across the state, the true costs can be underreported, which complicates reimbursement, and risks rewarding inefficiencies if you're just paying for what's happening now. So that's the feedback that we were hearing from the field. So we then turn to what might it cost to explore some of these options. So I'm going to provide some initial estimates to give you a sense of the range of costs. These are not, I think, final estimates. We'd like to hear from you all what you're interested in us digging into more. So we calculated them for the following options: providing staffing, for a reimbursement approach, or providing universal meals. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple new ideas around, there's some metrics called meals per labor hour, which is kind of an efficiency metric, or gets at how many meals can a staff member provide in an hour based on some assumptions around the types of meals they're providing. So those metrics can be used to measure operational efficiency. So we kind of use that metric as a way of thinking about what staff might you need to provide to meet those. So meals per labor hour being the number of meals served divided by the number of staff hours, just to get to how many meals are provided each hour. So then the other idea I'll introduce is the idea of meal equivalents. So if you can imagine, we were just talking about a lunch might have 5 components, where a snack has 2, a lunch or a breakfast would have less. So to try to put them into a common term, we're going to use meal equivalents. So 1 lunch being 1 meal equivalent, 2 breakfasts being another meal equivalent. So if you think about every breakfast is like half a meal, a snack is a third of a meal. So if you put those all together, you're able to figure out kind of a meal per equivalent, or a rate per equivalent meal. So then this next table is what's the range and number of meals per labor hour that you can see based on the type of cooking you're doing. So if we think back to what I was sharing earlier, districts are really doing a mix for the most part of convenience and conventional cooking. So those are the 2 columns you see. And then to what Dr. Pikus was saying, you see some efficiency the more meals you're providing. So if you look at that leftmost column, the fewer meals provided, the fewer meals you can provide in an hour. The more meals you provide over the whole day, the more meals you can provide in an hour, because you get some of that benefit if you picture making a whole pan of something. But you can see they range from about 10 to 20 meals. If you look from the very top corner of that conventional range is 10 to 12, versus the very bottom rightmost corner for conventional is 18 to 20. So you get the sense of kind of 10 to 20 meals is what you could expect a staff person, 1 person, to make in an hour. And getting, again, a little more efficient the more meals they're making. So to think about using that as a way to get to how many staff we might need, we used an average of 15 meals per labor hour. So right in that middle of that 10 to 20 range that we just showed you, and assumed a 7-hour day. So if you assume a staff member can make 15 meals per hour over 7 hours, 1 food service worker FTE could make 105 meals in that day. So we took that information, then applied, we didn't have a food service worker salary, so we used the salary in the model for custodians. And that's in part based on feedback during interview that we heard that's what at least 1 district tried to benchmark their payments for food service staff to. We then also looked at it both with and without benefits. So instead of thinking about providing an amount or reimbursement based on the number of meals a district then serves, you could think about using that metric to bake it into the funding model. So if you assumed 1 FTE would make 105 meals, you could apply 1 FTE per 105 students and think about it that way. You could then also apply it to either all students to get to the idea of providing universal meals, or just to provide to, say, your free and reduced lunch students. So there's a range in how you can think about how many meals you might want to provide. So again, as I mentioned, we thought about whether it should be benefited or not and considered the number of meals provided. So that's 105 daily equivalent meals that could be provided. So that could be one lunch. If you wanted to provide lunch and breakfast, that would need to be 1.5 meals that every student would receive. Then you could also think about providing district minimums or tiering by school size. So as we saw in that chart, the bigger you get, the little more efficient you get. But for now, we're going to stick to kind of that 15 meals per labor hour in a consistent way. There was also conversation that in addition to that food service staff, you might need a food service director in every district. That was the feedback we were hearing from the field. So we also calculated the cost of that using an statewide average business manager salary. You could argue for a different salary, but that's what we had to work with. So this table takes all that information and tries to estimate what would that staffing look like. So you can see the left shows you how many meals you're providing to students. So are you providing one meal to all students? Are you providing 1.5? So again, lunch and breakfast. And you can see what would that take if you're providing it to all students, just your FRL students, and if you did or did not include benefits. So all that to say, you can see you have a range for providing all lunch to all students of about 13 to 50 million, depending on, again, how many of your students you're trying to provide for, and if you're providing benefits. If you want to provide breakfast and lunch, that would be more in the ballpark of 19 to about 77 million, within the food service directors on top of that. So that's, again, just to give you a range. There's a lot of factors to think through about what you're trying to offer, but a sense of the range of costs that it might be just to provide the staffing. And I might have neglected to say it on the preceding slide. The idea behind this was perhaps building staffing in the model, and then the cost of food is either paid through the federal reimbursements or meal charges that communities can do. So it's just staff here. Yep, take a second to absorb. I just threw a lot of math.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, please.
Yeah, one quick question, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any breakdown on what the districts are currently spending on meals right now? With the numbers of students that are there, and what are we currently spending on those 41 out of 48, or however that information was? Do we have some of that information available currently? Thank you.
We do. Let me go back to. Okay, so you can, if you look at this chart, so it's a little outdated. So it's school year 24. So just backing up half a step, you can see that topmost light blue line is how much is being spent on food service now. So I think it's about 58 million right now is what's being spent on food services. When we think about that on kind of a per equivalent meal, when I looked at just the districts that participated in the National School Lunch Program, because we have a little better data for them, it was about, I think, $6.85 per equivalent meal that was being currently spent. $6.85. Yeah. And I think it'll come up in a slide here in just a second to make sure I said the right number. Okay. Okay. Any other questions before I move off of this one? Okay. Oh, and here's my 685. So I said the right number.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't expect you to have an answer for this, but maybe I'll get lucky. We're looking at tens of millions of dollars being spent. And when I research how much of this ends up in the trash can, it's 30 to 50%. We're talking millions and millions of dollars being thrown away. Do we have any differentiation between waste among free and reduced lunch families that are really in need versus providing lunches to those who don't need or want it?
Chair, Representative, that's a great question that I do not have an answer to. I'm going to look. Okay, my phone a friend also says. I'm sorry. I don't- Okay,
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brown,
yeah.
in a situation where we have an open campus that provides free lunches or breakfast, some of the students will likely still go off campus to have their meal, even though it's free versus McDonald's that they have to pay this $8. What percentage would opt for going off campus, even if you have a free lunch at school? Do you have any idea how many would still choose to go off campus?
Chair Representative, that's a great question. I think we would probably be best served looking at that information that Carla is referring to of what did it look like during COVID when universal meals were applied? Because I think you're exactly right. Even if you offer it to 100% of students, your participation rate is never going to be 100% of students. And I imagine we'd still see that difference between elementary students or a bit they're not leaving campus versus secondary students who have options. Because we did hear from districts that even when providing, they can't sometimes compete with just the going out and going to the gas station to grab something.
So Ms. Brown, the numbers that we had in that spreadsheet you have up there, did that assume all students stayed for meals, or was there some percentage that did go off campus?
Yeah, Co-Chair Heiner, that was 100% assumed participation. So I think those are probably intentionally the highest estimates of what this could cost, but it would likely be lower than that once we apply some sort of assumed participation rate to that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I mean, looking at the WDE data, their expenses is less than 60 million, right? So I think we can definitely assume that 100 million for universal meals would not be the same as the participation if we actually implemented it on the ground. What I'm curious would be how much administrative burden would we reduce if we did do universal meals from the amount that are expended by districts currently, if we could quantify that?
Chair Representative, I think that's a good question that I think we'd struggle to quantify to the testimony earlier, that figuring out exactly how you would estimate the difference in administrative burden is a challenge. But I do think it could happen. I just don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, if you could give me an answer, maybe, particularly when you're doing the PJPs, did you get the feeling that a lot of districts were offering benefits to our food service folks? Or was there any idea from them how many did or didn't, and how did that affect their staffing?
Senator, that varied by the districts that we spoke with. I think nearly all the ones we had at least some staff that were full-time positions that they're providing benefits to. But even in those districts, they then also had part-time staff that they were not. So a mix even within a district.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question going back to slide 49, which was the graph. For the 2020, 2021, and I think even 2022, does this graph include all of the federal funding revenue as well and expenditures, or is that somehow not demonstrated here? I see the bump, so I sort of think it probably does, but I just want to make sure that that's all in money.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So this next slide is the idea of what would it take to provide universal meals, using more of a per meal basis. So not just addressing the staffing, which was the preceding slides, but what it would take to also cover the cost of food. So distinguishing between the two. So if we looked at the expenditure information in FY24, divided that by the number of equivalent meals that were provided, it's about $6.85 per meal. When we look at that federal grant funding for those districts, they received about $3.59 per meal. So again, you see the highest reimbursement was that about $4.70. But if you think about an average over then the reduced meals they receive, the lesser reimbursements they receive for breakfast, this is how you get there. So we estimated some costs based on an assumed number of equivalent meals. Again, this would be 100% participation, so the most kind of conservative or the highest amount we think this might be. So assuming one equivalent meal at that $6.85 would be 100 million. If we assumed 1.5, so breakfast and lunch, it would be 160 million. Again, assuming every student took 100% of those meals, so you'd need to adjust down from there. That's an annual figure, correct? So the factors that could reduce the state portion of those costs, the districts that participated in the federal meal program reported about 29 million from federal grants. So all those ones that were discussed, not just the National School Lunch Program, but the breakfast, the commodities, all those other services. So we would think at least this amount could be covered by federal funding. It would be higher if you required participation in the National School Lunch Program or if CEP participation was required. Because right now, again, one of the barriers we're hearing about is that gap in reimbursement. But if the state was filling that in, we would expect you to be able to require that participation or and you could also have additional cost efficiencies if a greater number of meals were served. So as we saw in that chart, the more meals you provide a day, the less costly it is on a per meal basis, or the more meals that you can provide. So we might see that increase. And again, these are the highest estimates. So if we think about what might your participation rate have been during COVID, for example, we'll follow up on that. We might be able to estimate what that total would be. Let me keep going. Okay. You could also think about reimbursement or per meal payment. So reimbursement that you could think about is just the difference between expenditures and federal. Food service was about 35 million. If you also thought about then requiring a certain amount to come from paid meal services, the current delta again was about 18 million. I'm going to say current in SY24, so most current. Per meal payment, you could also then again, instead of reimbursement, provided on a per meal basis, both either that difference between expenditures and what they receive from federal or what they're able to also provide in paid meals. And so it'd be a similar cost to reimbursement, just a different way of thinking about doing the calculation. Okay. So those are all our slides. I think I'd be interested to hear from the committee. What areas would you like us to dig into more? What can we bring back at the next conversation that would be helpful?
So I guess my thought is just kind of a couple rhetorical questions. Questions that I've heard from people over the months, you know, is the state responsible for feeding all students in public education? Particularly given what other states do or don't do, given the state Supreme Court decision. I think that's a question that's facing us. Another comment I often hear is, can a hungry child learn algebra on an empty stomach? And then finally, what does the funding model look like when you've answered some of those questions? And I think that's what's facing this committee right now. We just went through the SRO issue. I mean, I'm not blind to seeing the cost of the SRO issue that we're going to have to face and how that looks. I've seen the numbers now for the food service nutrition program. It's a number. And then obviously we have not even hit yet the 1-to-1 computer ratio. We haven't hit the unintended consequences that we're still looking at beyond these issues, mental health. it's a little staggering. But at the same time, we're going to have to figure it out. So we have, and I guess I'm making these comments to you because you are the experts and we need options. And this committee is going to end up with draft legislation to the state legislature on these issues. And we're going to have to do that in a relatively short period of time. So, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I'd ask, obviously, we've talked about some things to consider, the CEP, what it looks like and the finances, but when we look at the last estimates, they're obviously rather significant and I think probably daunting to my colleagues and me. But when I look at, again, this graph on slide 49, which is just an actuals for a little over a decade, and the actual expenditures statewide are just getting up to around 60 million. So we'll assume that this last year, they're probably around 60 million. And that the revenues under whatever it is districts are doing at any given time come in around $40 million for that 60 million. So as I look at this graph, I mean, the first thing that I think is we're about a third short. And rather than prospectively trying to determine how much of what the model costs, so to speak, historically, if we had paid a third of the cost of the expenditures out as a direct distribution to districts based on what their expenses were, so reimburse them for 1/3 of what their costs were, we cover every year of the last 12 years. It's just at that point, I would point to it and say that's constitutional. We covered it. Go team. And so I'll just say it's substantially less than $105 million, which
That's good
has my
news.
good colleague
That's very
smiling.
good news.
I guess I'd ask you that you kind of look at that perspective. What is our gap? If we don't change anything in terms of how the state is deploying, and we have a diversity of interests in our districts right now, they're doing what they have decided works best on their district. And we just say, all right, look, we're falling a third short. Let's just cover a third. Can we investigate? And all I have is the aggregate number. So that idea might fail miserably in Matizzi or in Lusk or somewhere. Who the heck knows where that would fail? But maybe an analysis along those lines where we're just doing a gap analysis and what does it take for us to make districts whole and what is a reasonable algorithm for that is defensible.
Yep, go.
Any thoughts on that?
Senator Rothfuss, I have a couple of thoughts on that, particularly in light of the gap and what's there. I think one thing to remember is the gap has two components. One is the gap between what districts need to spend to provide school lunches that meet the children's needs and what the federal government reimburses. But a second component of that is the districts that choose not to participate in the federal program and therefore have a gap of 100%. And so I think as you consider this, one of the really important questions to look at is what do you require districts to participate in federal programs before they get help from the state? I think that's an important issue, and that's a component of we may or may not, I don't know, have the data to be able to draw a second line there that shows you the difference between those two. And then I think another question in this is Dr. Brown used as a wage for food service workers, the custodians, right? And I'm sure there are people back there who can answer this question better than I can, but my best guess is many of the food service workers earn less than that. That is, their wages are lower than what a custodian gets paid, but I don't know that. I don't know if you have any data. Yeah, so because that's often the case in school districts, which would be driving some of the costs here. And of course, my sense is, I don't know, I'm certain the food service workers and probably the people who pay them would like them to earn the salaries in the range of what custodians work to help them with their worlds as well. So that all of those things are components of some of those numbers, which I was watching your faces particularly when the $105 million figure came up, or the $157 million figure. And so, yeah, I'm not sure where that all falls or what your choices are, but I think those are a lot of the issues that drive that gap that you're looking at so carefully.
Yeah, please.
Follow up on that. As a percentage, though, of total expenditures, it doesn't matter whether they take the federal funds or not. It doesn't change that calculation, which is probably one of the elegant aspects of taking that approach to it. You don't have to compel them to participate in the federal program, or they could, on the other extreme, like my district, fully go to CEP. The gap is based on what is the total number of expenditures. You would expect that a district is then motivated to minimize the total amount of expenditures under any circumstance there, so that the motivation is correct. And then they look for the least cost scenario. If they opt out of the federal food program because that's manageable for them, because they can pick up the expense due to, and that's what we have I know at least one of our districts has a very small free and reduced lunch number. And so they opt to increase the quality high enough that they have an incredibly high participation that can bring the average meal cost down. And so their economics works out. The expenditure concept still of 1/3 of the expenditures is still going to work for that scenario. So I guess I don't see where there's any problem or any need, I should say, to compel anything about the federal food program if you just do a 30% of your expenditure, 1/3 of your expenditures are provided through statewide reimbursement. Does that make sense?
Senator, I think what you said is you're not going to ensure that everybody gets funded at 100%, but it's something like 1/3, and it's their choice whether they take the federal money beyond that or not.
Correct.
Is that what you were saying? Okay,
Correct.
you're right. That wouldn't change. I mean, then that undoes all the concerns I have.
Okay.
Our thought was that in order to cover all of the food services costs that districts exhibit, you would want to require them to be in the federal program so that you weren't paying money that the feds would give you otherwise.
Absolutely.
Because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's the issue, I think. And then if school districts programs are more expensive, obviously that's an empirical question, whether they are or they aren't, and what the reasons may be. And of course, I don't know how to evaluate the quality of the meals. If children, the students prefer it and eat it. I think it was Senator Salazar who said he remembers pizzas and hamburgers. I do too. I even remember when they took the count every day in my elementary classrooms, and Thursdays were hamburger days, and that was the biggest count day. Okay, so parents were willing to pony up for hamburgers once a week, because I don't remember too many free. I don't know if there were free and reduced lunch. When I was in 5th grade, that was beyond my level of what I was paying attention to, obviously.
Yeah, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask our LSO something in regards to what we're talking about? Thank you. I'm looking at the court ruling here, and I have some concerns about the directions we're talking about going here. It says the evidence demonstrated a school funding model which does not include a nutrition component, and funding for school nutrition is unconstitutional because nutrition is an essential component of a quality education. It doesn't say school lunch, it says school nutrition. Could that be interpreted that this is part one? Could that be interpreted that we are being mandated for breakfast and lunch because a kid can just as easily not have dinner and breakfast and show up hungry at that point, if that is the reasoning behind it? And number two, constitutional rights are not based on income. Is this a demand for universal breakfast and lunch while we're talking about these other offshoots we can go on? We might be going down a dark path where it's a dead end anyway. I'll let you go with those two because I did have a third one, but those are pretty big right there.
Yeah, certainly, members of the committee, Tanya Heitrick, Operations Administrator. I don't have a specific response to those nuanced questions, but I'm happy to look into that. I took the court's directive as more of a general statement that's included in their PowerPoint presentation, that particular statement. And I don't know that the court got into necessarily whether it was income-based or whether it was universal. I don't think that the decision was quite that nuanced, but I'm happy to take a look at it and have an answer for you in the morning.
And the other question would be, it'd have to do with Senator Rothfuss had mentioned about funding the gap. I don't see in this ruling that it says the state needs to step in and fill in a gap. It says the state needs to step up and pay for lunch, so the districts are not doing that. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Kelly, that is my reading of the decision, as well as whatever the obligation is. It's the obligation for the entire K-12 population and not necessarily a portion of it. If the state were to fund that portion, would it be defensible? I can't answer that question unless it was before the court, but that's certainly not my reading of the ruling as it stands now. I would, note for purposes of the record that that decision is stayed. And so this is not a mandate of the court currently, but as Mr. Wilmarth pointed out earlier, this work, this interim is in preparation in the event that that decision is upheld.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is a follow-up to what Representative Kelly talked about. The court ruling says a nutrition component, yet we are comparing what 6 states in the union have done for universal nutrition, lunch and breakfast, but we're not looking at any of what our states are doing that surround us. Now, we're only asked by the courts to do a nutritional component, but why are we solely looking at universal nutrition that some of these states that are far away from Wyoming are doing? What are some of our neighboring states doing? What's Utah? What's Montana? What's Idaho doing? Let's learn from them and compare ourselves to them rather than Massachusetts. So, the only one on that list is Colorado, and it says on this slide deck that you've given us, they opt into a free meal program, but I don't understand how to opt in and whether it's universal nutrition. But I'm lacking information on our surrounding states. Some of these states that are doing less than full nutrition, full breakfast, full lunch for everybody, and full snacks after school. What are they doing? And why do we have to be similar to Massachusetts instead of similar to surrounding states?
Mr. Chair, we have that information. I just pulled it up and it's a little hard to summarize. So let me put it together tonight and we can present it tomorrow morning. It's not as simple as saying, we have universal or we don't.
And with completely understandable that you would ask us, we need direction. My response is let us think about that before the end of tomorrow. I think we'll have a better idea. You have given us a lot of information and it's hitting us. And so I think a little time to think about this would be helpful too. So other questions? Dr. Pikus, what else? Anything else? Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do have a response to the question regarding nutritional programs.
Yes.
And when you look at the decision, the evidence and the discussion by the court is surrounding the National School Lunch Program. The numbers are related to that as well. And so while the decision also speaks to nutritional programs, it is specifically related to like the federal school nutrition programs. And so that is like the National School Lunch Program. So do you have the means to provide lunch to K-12 students? Does that include breakfast? I can't answer that question, but the evidence was shortfalls in the school nutrition programs for the K-12 schools across Wyoming. That was the issue that was tried before the district court.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you. Appreciate that. Without sounding self-important, I know the Supreme Court is probably looking at our proceedings to see where we're going and how we're managing the opinion of the court. I wish there was better direction, but there wasn't. So, Dr. Pikus, thank you. Thank your crew. What I would like to do is take a 5 to 10 minute break and then come back and hear public comment, public testimony. Thanks. Hmm. So I will bring this meeting back to order, and what I'd like to do is start public comment. And
Invite somebody up to come and talk to us here.
I know, well, I think we got plenty of folks who'd like to come and talk to us. So
Well, I'm the food service director this time, so.
So with that, let's begin, and good to have you here, and
Thank you.
please introduce yourself. And
So, Mr. Chairman, my name is Jeremy Smith. I'm the food service director for Sheridan County School District Number 1. Mr. Chairman, I want you not to get into the conversation about universal feeding. That will derail the purpose and the problem that we have, which is the gap. We are taking monies intended by you and the taxpayers who give you the money to spend in classrooms, and we're spending it instead on food service programs. Because to your point earlier, hungry kids don't learn. But I don't want you to get into and lost in the deep weeds of should we fund universal feeding programs and feed every kid for free and all that other stuff, because that's a much different issue than the fact that we're spending monies you intend to go to classrooms on something else. And so, Mr. Chairman, my suggestion to you is focus on that gap portion of funding that we're subsidizing. We've all had forever the incentive to reduce that gap ourselves. We've done everything we reasonably can to reduce that, right? Because we know we're taking that money from other places and reasons and spending it in a place we know we have to, but we wouldn't otherwise. So, Mr. Chairman, my suggestion is start with something that is caused, or part of that gap is caused by the mandates that you and the federal government give us related to pension and health insurance. So my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, for no other reason than you've just decided previously, they're not eligible for us to report them as participants on the health insurance program and receive money for them. So my suggestion is do that. That's a federal mandate that we can't get around. Because we're all large government employers, if they're at 30 hours, we have to provide health insurance, and it's really expensive. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's where I would start. The pension, 20 hours is a requirement in our district. And I think in most every district, it's also 20. And so start with that. Allow us to put them on that and receive the monies, those state monies, for those benefits. So start there. I'm not positive, but I think that covers a vast majority of the gap, which is the problem. And I would, again, strongly urge you not to get into the conversation and discussion about should we, would we, could we feed every kid, because there's too many other ancillary issues around that. I'm just worried about the funding gap. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my simple suggestion. For a little background, sir, of our 8 schools, 2 of them participate in the National School Lunch Program. That's our 2 large elementaries. The rest of the schools do not. And we did that, Mr. Chairman, back when President Obama and his wife instituted some of the reformations in the federal program, and we just couldn't abide by those constraints. It just didn't work in our system. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's my suggestion. I think that's simple. I think that's pretty straightforward and gets really to the heart of what the issue is that we're spending money on food service that we should be spending on classrooms. So, stand for any questions after that.
So I would like you to repeat, 30 seconds, repeat that with regard to the 20 hours a week, saving money. Repeat that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Particularly for Dr. Pikus.
Okay, so again, it's the mandatory benefits, right? The state has said thou shalt provide a pension for your employees. Sensible, reasonable. No one's fighting against that. Yes, it's a very good thing. And the federal government has said thou shalt provide health insurance at certain thresholds. Those are the benefits, those mandatory benefits that really, really hurt and cost us a lot of money. And so my sense is if those things are taken care of, that gap becomes zero or much, much smaller. And we likely can live with that, or there's other mechanisms, workers' comp or whatever it is, some other version that gets us all the way to the gap coverage. So I think that was 38 seconds, Mr. Chairman.
I was waiting for you.
Yep. So on that point, and we'll have to get the data for this, but you can take a look at it. Others can take a look at it as well and see if this bridges your gap where we're looking at that 30-ish%. Right now, the way the legislation, the SF 81 was drafted, we've got coverage eligibility for basically everybody, but not for food service personnel.
Correct.
if we explicitly, if we did nothing else but added, including food service personnel, and then that rolled into the state picks up the tab on that component, it basically gets distributed. You think that that would be sufficient to bridge the gap for your districts?
It would.
That alone?
Mr. Chairman, it
well as
certainly
the
would for it
retirement.
certainly would for my district, and I do not believe I'm unique in that.
Okay. Well, as we have people march through, let's hear about it, because that's a clean and easy change, which is always nice, right? You just add a couple of words, and I don't.
And again, Mr. Chairman, the non-discrimination statement in my district is, if you are hungry, we will feed you. That's what it is, right? So we're going to feed every kid who's hungry and by other means can't provide for themselves or their parents or whatever. But I don't need you to solve that problem. We've solved that problem. We just have mandatory benefits that are very, very expensive relative to their earnings.
So you're committed to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Good.
again, Mr. Chairman, we are a hybrid. Some schools participate in the National School Lunch Program, some do not. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Co-Chair Salazar and Heiner and the committee. I am Kristen Mayo from Teton County. I'm the CFO there. And I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds with some of the questions that you've been asking, some of the questions you asked the consultants. We have one school of our 10 schools that we did the CEP analysis on because it was the only one that reached the threshold where all of our students could qualify for those free meals. And when we did that analysis, the reimbursement, if we were on CEP, was $104,768.54. But our actual reimbursement not being on the CEP program was $124,074.28. So it was actually more not participating in the CEP program. And part of that comes down to the free and reduced percentages, right? How many of your are direct cert, and then how many do you get qualified for free and reduced? And this comes back to, we're not only seeing inflationary costs for food, we also have inflationary costs for staffing. And those federal requirement rates for qualifying for free and reduced meals are pretty stagnant and almost don't apply in Teton County. And I would guess that they don't apply in a lot of other communities either, because they're so low to be able to qualify for free and reduced meals. That being said, when we look at the gap, and I like the idea that Senator Rothfuss had of the 30% or 33%, whatever that is, our total expenditures in our food service program are right around $2 million. And we have done, we participate in the National School Lunch Program. We've done self-run kitchens. 2 years ago, we contracted out our food service because the cost of the salaries and the benefits was so high, we could no longer continue to offer those benefits to the food service staff. And so our only options were to either contract out or come up with some other creative way, and we didn't have that. So we received $608,000 in federal reimbursement. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Senator McEwen, and I'd like to know the numbers
Yeah.
of what money you saved going through the private contractor. Go ahead, Senator.
So if you don't do the CEP, you're making 104
124.
or 124. If you did do the CEP, it's 104.
Yep.
Is that a difference of the full price lunch, people paying for lunches?
That's just on the federal reimbursement. Those are only the federal reimbursement numbers. That doesn't include any revenue from self-paid lunches. And I'm going to get into those numbers for our district in just a second.
I just want to wrap my head around it, why I was stuck on it. Thank you.
That's why that CEP program can be very beneficial if you have a majority of your district that qualifies. But if it doesn't, it can end up being less of a federal reimbursement than just doing it the regular way that we're doing it. We didn't explore necessarily the category 2, whatever that was. I might not be that educated on those differences, but our total federal reimbursement this year was $608,000. Our total expenditures were $2,030,000. And our general fund subsidy was $600,000. We transferred $600,000 from our general fund to our food service program. we generated $975,000 in revenue from paid lunches. And it's something that we haven't really talked about at all during this committee is what are the paid meal pricing. Our current paid meal prices are $3 for breakfast across all grade levels, $4.50 for K-5, 6-8 is $5, and 9-12 is $5.50. And I would guess that those are some of the highest in the state. But we've had to adjust those a little bit. We have the same policy as Jeremy does in his district that we feed kids. We don't, this is an adult problem. This is not a kid problem. And we want to make sure that they're ready to learn when they hit the classroom. So you might find a little variance in those numbers that I gave you. And some of that is that we had a carryover negative balance from last year. So the increase in the subsidy, they don't line up exactly. I'm happy to get into those details. But there's just a couple of anomalies there. But when you look at the larger numbers, 30% would cover the gap that we have in our district. That's also information that we provide to WDE on an annual basis through our 601. So I would guess it would be very easy for you all to receive the total subsidies for each district because we've already reported all of that information annually, and you can probably get it historically. One of the biggest issues that we have in our community with the USDA food program is the food waste. Once something is served, a carton of milk, an orange, it cannot go back in the kitchen. And it's one of the biggest complaints we get from our stakeholders, from our families, from our teachers in our community, is that we can't reserve those, even if the carton of milk wasn't opened, even if the orange just sat on the plate. So we've actually instituted something in our district called share tables, where we put any unused and unopened items on a share table. They're free for any students that need to take food home, grab a snack. It's all there, and it usually ends up being milk and fruit. And those are the things that we're required to have on the plate, but kids don't necessarily eat. So we've incorporated that little ambiance or addition to our cafeterias.
Senator?
Thanks. How successful is that? Like what percentage of those milks end up being consumed and the fruit that you end up putting out?
I don't have an exact percentage. I would say most of the fruit ends up being gone. You see kids shoving food into their backpacks before they leave home. Or if there's after school programs, that food is there and available for those kids. We do not have an after school snack program. The milk, we had a lot of parent feedback this year. We have a food steering committee that I run that meets monthly throughout the year to get stakeholder feedback from parents and schools and teachers and kids. And through that, we discontinued chocolate milk, which has been very controversial. So we are only offering white milk, and it is consumed at a lesser rate than the chocolate milk
Very
is.
daring of you.
My kids would be bold. I don't know what we'd do. Thank you.
Biggest complainer was our superintendent.
Yeah. Thank you.
So on the milk, like, are you allowed to bring that to a food shelf? Or is that, yeah,
It's very restrictive, as I understand it, and I'm sure Carla could expand on this a little bit. It cannot come back in the kitchen. We can't resell it. And I don't think that we can donate it anywhere else. We can put it on the share table, and if it's taken, it's taken. If not, it has to be thrown away.
yes, Senator.
So when you put the milk on the share table, is it on ice or is it refrigerated any way, or is it?
It depends on the location and how quickly those foods are typically consumed. I think we have a couple of locations that have a little fridge there at the share table, but not all of our locations do. So it depends. But it is going in the trash if it's not consumed. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ms. Mayo, can we investigate why we can't give it to Whole Food Rescue or something? Because I know they do have cold storage. So, I think that would be great if we couldn't let that go to waste.
I'm happy to research it. I think Carla may be able to explain why we can't do that. If not, I'm happy to research it in my own community. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, Senator Heiner or Representative Heiner, you had a question about how Colorado is implementing their universal free meals or whatever they call their program. And I actually went to Boulder Valley Schools to tour their facilities. And they've done it in a stepped approach. It started with offering funding for school meals, basically the food of the meals. And then in a next session of legislation, I think it was a year and a half ago, they started funding staffing for those facilities. I only know Boulder Valley because that's the school that I went to. They have a centralized kitchen where they cook everything from scratch. We have a high demand for that in our district to have healthier foods. What our community considers to be healthy foods isn't necessarily what the USDA considers to be healthy foods. So that's something that we are dealing with in our community, and that's why we have the Food Service Steering Committee. But there is a little bit of a gap in terms of what people consider to be healthy foods. That's it.
Good afternoon, Co-Chair Salazar and Heiner. I'm Clark Coberly. I'm the Superintendent of Weston County School District 7 in Upton. We are one of the districts that has gone off the National School Lunch Program, and I'd kind of like to share with you a little bit of that perspective and advocate and support for the discussion that was going on before the break of not tying us to the NSLP. First of all, Co-Chair Salazar, when you were talking about the SROs, you kind of presented some guidelines of looking at local decision-making and flexibility and unique to each community and having a collaborative effort to make that happen. And I think that's germane to this topic as well, and part of the reason why we did this. We would just ask for funding the positions. I would go extend off what Mr. Smith had said with the benefits, but also the FTEs. I think that would be what would be necessary to close that gap. Currently, we transfer $140,000 from our general fund to operate our lunch program, and really that is the salary and benefits for the personnel that we have in there. That's our gap. Excuse me. $140,000. 3 for us.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you. How many hours a week do these food service employees put in? Do they meet the 20-hour week for a part-time, or is it less or more?
2 do, 1 doesn't, or one meets the 20 hours and the other 2 exceed it. They're full-time.
Okay, so they wouldn't be eligible for benefits if they were FTE eligible.
There are 2 of them are eligible for benefits.
But
They
the
do
other-
not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, just kind of give some of the perspective. I think Representative Kelly asked a question about food waste and waste. We've seen, since we've gone off the National School Lunch Program, we've seen a decrease in waste as far as what's required to be on the plate. Our students, and we've even seen an uptick. We actually have more adults in the building eating lunch now that we've gone off the National School Lunch Program. Another thing, and Kristen
Well,
talked about it.
let me
Just
stop
go
you
ahead.
there. So
Co-Chair.
what is it, the quality?
I would say yes. Quality, there are certain things that have been required to be on plates. With the menu requirements, I think anytime there's something where the larger entity is dictating what you got to put on the plate, there were some things that students could only refuse one thing off of the plate, I believe is the rule and guideline. But so there were certain things that they would have to take that they did not want to take. I would just say the personnel that we have running our food program, the quality has improved because they don't have some of the same menu restrictions that they did under the NSLP.
So you obviously had tried the federal food.
We had been, so we're the Johnny come lately. I think there's one other district. We're going into our 3rd year off the National School
Okay,
Lunch Program.
but-
So we do have some comparable, we don't, it's hard to measure the data as far as how many more students are eating, because sometimes it depends on whether it's pizza or hamburger day or, you know, something along those lines. But
So 3 years ago, did you ever try the federal food that was offered?
Yeah,
under the?
I
So
I did
did you,
some.
tell me what your thoughts were?
I thought, and because the food's, you know, everybody's chuckling. It's kind of a loaded question. I've been lifelong friends with the previous school lunch director, and she did the best that she could with what it was. What we were seeing though is, just asking me. Yeah, no, I think we have better lunches today than we did before. Yeah. Sorry for that. There's menu options that we have that we didn't have available, and some of the ingredients that we can have in, and also anecdotal evidence. I can see our kids are consuming more than they have been previously as well. And I do think Mrs. Banks did bring up that there were some restrictions as far as middle school, high school students, as far as what the amount was and whether they could have seconds and those type of things. We don't have a lot of options in Upton to go off campus to eat. We do have an outstanding local grocery store that students would go to, and we are seeing kids sticking around more. We also have an a la carte option that was not available for us under the National School Lunch Program. That's been tremendously beneficial.
Some of, this is not my statement, okay?
Mhm.
But, I hear from some citizens saying, the federal program, the federal food that is provided, yeah, it's not Wendy's, it's not
Mhm.
Pizza Hut, but it's also not going hungry.
Correct.
What's your response to that?
I would say some of the older students that would be more mobile may make some decisions to leave campus. As far as them not going hungry, I think they were making other decisions, but yet we would still provide those things. And now we're able to, run our food service program more like a business and make things that are appealing to them in the small district. I would say also, when I would look at some of our younger students, I think some of them would bring lunch home to school more, even if they did qualify for free and reduce. And so they were not, because it wasn't as appealing to them. And we have fewer students bringing sack lunches. And because of that, I think the quantity and the quality of what is coming out of our kitchens is now better than what they would have been doing if they were bringing their Lunchable in a bag. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So can you tell us about obviously you're still providing, I assume, free and reduced lunches.
Right.
You're just not engaged in the federal program, but you have to find the way to subsidize that. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that and what your free and reduced lunch eligible population percentage is, and just what that program looks like?
So off the top of my head, I don't have that percentage with you. It's about, I would say, somewhere between 20 and 25% as far as where we're at right now. We kind of work that in just as our cost basis as far as revenue and expenses, and it's just kind of built in of how we set prices for breakfast and lunch and those different types of things. So we make sure all our kids eat, and I think they are eating more now than they have been before. And again, it's not, I would not say it's for everybody, and that type of thing. We were not receiving, it was economical for us because the amount of money that we would give up in the revenue from free and reduced lunch was not enough. We felt we could make it up in the way that we ran the program. So.
So you said that 140,000, I believe, was your general fund transfer.
That is for us. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, what's your total revenues? This gets back to the question of what percentage of overall revenue is that 140K? Or expenditures, not revenue, my apologies. What is your
of our total expenditures? I could get back to you with that money right now.
Okay.
I don't have that dollar amount. We could dig into it. The other thing that is kind of a factor in that, we have 800 plus students enrolled in our district. We only serve 245 of them in our district because we partner with a virtual program. So as far as what our total expenditure, it's going to look a little bit different. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The other thing too is we are able to, not only do we have less waste, we're able to, as Kristen was talking about, reuse some of the meal, some of the food that was prepared. We don't take it off trays and put it on another tray. That's not what we're getting at, folks. But what we're able to do is what is produced, if it's not taken at the elementary middle school, we have lunch later at the high school, and we can, we can just repurpose it that way. I recently, a few weeks ago, I found out one of our neighboring school districts, they actually are able to, if I tried to say what the packaging arrangement would be, they're able to package their foods and send it home with their kids after school or on weekends and those different types of things. And I think that's just kind of the novelty of what we've been able to do as a small district and being able to make those local decisions. So, yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Kate Swistowis. I'm the Technology Director for Fremont 25, which is Riverton. And you're probably wondering what the Technology Director is doing talking about food service. And I wanted to bring up back to the CEP program. So our district qualifies to participate in CEP, but we don't hit at that sweet spot that previous people had talked about. But I'm pushing for our participation in CEP because it's once we are district-wide free and reduced, and that's a federal designation, then our E-rate reimbursement goes from 70% to 85%. And I believe there's other federal funding that would increase pretty significantly as soon as we go district-wide free and reduced. So if our district, regardless of the money on the food service side, but if our district went from CEP tomorrow, my E-rate budget would increase by 15%. So there are some other factors that are in line with CEP participation, and it does help kind of facilitate some other federal fundings that we wouldn't necessarily qualify for at the higher rate. And I'm sorry? We're still working through the numbers right now. We are not going to implement it for the 26-27 school year. We're working on some data agreements so that we can get our direct cert numbers up so that reimbursement rate is a little higher with CEP, and we're working with Director Banks on that. So we're still working that out on the business office, but the tech department really wants to move that direction. Yeah. May decrease.
Change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and the other thing I wanted to bring up anecdotally as a parent here in the county. So previously I worked for Fremont 21, which is in Fort Washakie, but I resided here in Lander. And when my children were little, they came to school with me where I worked just for transportation and after school, that kind of thing made it easier. And Fremont 21 is a CEP participating district. And so all of the meals were eaten by all of the students at school. It was just the culture of the school. The kids came to school in the morning, everybody ate breakfast, everybody ate lunch, and there was no differentiation. It was just the way it was. When my kids got older and wanted to come back to Lander to participate in swimming, I had to start paying for school lunch. And that was a real hit to my pocketbook. Because I didn't qualify for free or reduced. And there were weeks, that week before payday where things were really, really tight. So I don't want to underestimate the burden that places on families that don't qualify for free and reduced, but don't have a lot of extra money. So I think there's real value in that. And Fremont County is a great kind of little test bed because you've got districts that are in both situations. So I just wanted to share that with the committee.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. Yes, Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Swistowitz, sorry, is that how you pronounce it, Ms.
Swistowis, yes.
Swistowitz. Thank you. So I don't know if I missed this earlier, but E-rate is a federal program.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you look on your cell phone bill that you get from Verizon or AT&T, there's a tax in the tax and fee charges that says Universal Service Fund. That is a tax that's issued to everyone who uses the cell phone, and that goes into the federal E-rate program, and that is used to subsidize basic internet infrastructure for schools, libraries, and rural health. So we're obviously in the schools component of that. E-rate issues, allocates $201.57 per student over 5 years. And depending on the poverty rate of your district, you can claim as high as 85% of that 201, all the way down to 40% of that 201. Like I said, if we started participating in CEP, currently we get a 70% reimbursement rate. So we get 70% of that 201 per kid over 5 years. We would jump to 85 overnight. And I would defer to the superintendents and business managers about consolidated grant and Title I and how that funding would change up or down depending on if you were district-wide free and reduced.
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting.
so Mr. Chairman, just to confirm, the school nutrition program, the CEP, affects eligibility or reimbursement rate for E-rate.
Correct.
Okay.
It also impacts, fun fact, because if you mess up your reports, it also impacts teacher student loan forgiveness programs. So if you are a teacher who is working in a high poverty school district, and the way that they determine if your school is high poverty is by your free and reduced rate for that school or district, dictates whether your student loans are eligible for forgiveness. So there's a lot that goes with that free and reduced eligibility rate that is outside of school lunch.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Could you tell me how difficult the paperwork is for a CEP in some of these programs? Because that's something that I've heard a lot, that it's just overbearing. It's just hard to navigate.
I can't tell you how difficult it would be because when I worked for Fremont 21, that was all handled in the business office and that wasn't in my purview in the technology department. I can tell you at Fremont 25, we have a whole software system that deals with free and reduced lunch applications, but it is a burdensome and it's a invasive application, resistance for people to fill that out. The beauty of the CEP program is the direct cert. And what direct cert means is if you are participating in state food stamps, state TANF, and a couple other programs, you don't have to also fill out a free and reduced lunch application. You're directly certified because you've already proven you already qualify through these other programs. So when Director Banks talks about getting that CEP or that direct cert rate up, that's what she's talking about. If your families already qualify with TANF and food stamps and things like that, then they don't have to fill out the application. If you're not participating in CEP, every year your families have to fill out what I would consider a pretty invasive application, in addition to whatever else they've got going on in their lives.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Sir?
My name's Greg Rohr. I'm the business manager and the food service director for Sheridan 3. So I figured I probably should share my perspective for this one of the smallest districts in the state. We've been off the program for 10 years, just to let you know where I'm coming from and how we've benefited from it. I don't know if that helps in your decisions, even if it was, like I said, just to pay for salaries and stuff. But so one of the reasons we decided to was, again, the cost. So there was a lot of situations in the district with that. We're a K-12 building, so we have 10 minutes in between lunch and serving the elementary and the high school and junior high. And in that process, there's a lot of things you have to do, like you have to count what's left of the milk after you serve the elementary and then restock. You got to count what's left on the salad bar and then restock, and then get ready for the kids. So that was one thing, was just what was entailed because of what we've heard, paperwork and stuff like that, and the records that needed to be kept. I think the biggest thing was, again, because of that, we had 3 employees in the kitchen. We were able to go down to 2 because of all the time that was saved from that. Those weren't the main reasons, but they were a benefit of why we went off the program. I think some of the things was that, to answer the question about waste. I mean, again, to kind of talk about it's actually, you have the 5 components. They have to take 3. One of them has to be a fruit or a vegetable. Kids will sit there in the line and argue with you that we're not going to eat it. I said, that's okay. You have to, or I'm not going to get my reimbursable meal. So they take it, they throw it away. We went from 2 55-gallon garbage cans kind of full to just a quarter of one on the majority of the meals. That's how much waste we cut down because of the not being on the program and making them take what they don't want to eat. Now, I come back to the hungry thing. I do have a reasoning for that, I think, is because, of course, the portion control is, for junior high and high school, it was low compared to what they're used to. But the other thing is that, that's maybe the only component that they eat. And we even have a salad bar. We had a salad bar and everything. They could help themselves too, but they're, teenagers and anything green. So, so the only thing they were eating was the main entree for a lot of the parts. So that didn't really help with the program. And so I think that has a lot to do with them still being hungry, but it's still a problem if they're hungry, because then they're starting to sneak in their own, not sneak in, but bring chips and all that kind of stuff, which defeats the whole purpose of the National School Lunch Program. In fact, some of the kids would bring their own salt because we can't regulate that. They can bring their own stuff from home, and they complain about the salt, so they'd bring their own salt and things like that. So I don't know, it just was a program that was kind of not meeting our kids' needs. And so, but the biggest thing was the savings. Again, the savings was one of the biggest things too, was again, we talked about the waste, we talked about less employees. I had one less employee. So after that first year, and I just kind of kept track of this for a little while, we actually, even with compared to the previous year when we were on the program, with the cost of the money that we received for the commodities, the fresh fruits and vegetables, and then the reimbursements, we still came out ahead financially, if by not, even though we didn't collect that money.
So help me understand. Do you think it's because of the size of your school?
I think so, and that's what I'm saying. Every probably district's going to be different, but we cut down on what we purchased because we didn't have to have it to make them take it. So we ordered less, we prepared less, and so there again, our food costs went way down because of that. Yeah, we were serving the other things. So like one of the things is like with the leftovers, if you did have some, we could sell those as a la carte, but we couldn't give it to them. Well, in this case, we could now, and just to make sure there was no waste. Because, when you make a pan of lasagna, you got to make the whole pan. So if we don't quite serve the whole pan, we were able to, give that to them where before we would have to serve it. So that kind of helped us with waste too and things like that. So, but they ate the stuff that they wanted to eat and not just taking things that they didn't have to eat or didn't want to eat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you said shared in 3, correct?
What's that?
District shared in 3?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I was looking at the report, and incidentally, it was pointed out to me by one of our good superintendents that the district by district analysis is on page 146 of the consultant's report from February 6th. So if we pull that up, we can see it. And I was looking at it, and I noticed, and this is for the 23-24 school year, but the report for Sheridan 3 has total expenditures for food program of $130,000 and total revenue of $30,000.
Yeah.
And so 77% subsidy is what that's demonstrating. Is that accurate?
That is correct. In fact, if you want this year's, I brought them.
Yeah.
So we actually budgeted $140,000 for this year. $100,000 that was from the general fund. Our revenues for this year were, with just the sale of meals and stuff, was around $25,000. Our food cost was $35,229. We almost expended the whole budget of $140,000 for wages and stuff. So literally every year, my goal is to just meet food costs. I didn't do it this year. We've been close some years. We've raised prices a couple of years ago just to kind of help with that, with the increase of inflation and stuff like that. But we've never, even on the food program, we've never been able to cover the cost of the wages and stuff like that. I mean, if we can get the supplies and the food and stuff covered, we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. So you said for this year, then 35,000 was the total food out of 140,000 budget.
Mhm.
So the food itself really is a small fraction. It's a quarter of your costs, 3/4 for this,
Yeah.
for the meal program.
It's wages and
Is
benefits.
wages and benefits
Yep.
for your system. Okay.
Yep.
I wonder if that's common, and I don't have that data, I don't think, but you're at the smaller district size, so obviously there's sort of a minimum personnel concern there. I'm curious what that looks like when it scales up to a larger district, but thank you for that testimony.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry for my ignorance here, but did you say that the National School Lunch Program doesn't, it controls the amount of salt intake, so you had students bringing salt? There's no
Yeah.
salt shaker or?
Yeah, there's a lot of requirements that like sugar content, all kinds of stuff they control.
So if one of your students, follow up, so if one of the students is in athletics and they're having good workouts, they need additional salt. So what do you do in a situation like that?
Again, they're just encouraged to bring their own. Was encouraged at that point. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Charles Oskey, Superintendent, Johnson County School District number 1. Just a quick side note. So I was a superintendent principal in Sheridan 3 when we initiated that, and there was better food, more kids ate more, and it was a great transition to that point 10 years ago. I came up here simply just to express ditto to what Dr. Smith from Sheridan 1 said a few minutes ago in relevance to just changing a few words, like you said, Senator Rothfuss, that makes a difference. So with my great business manager's knowledge, 1/3 of what we have to supplement out of our budget, if we were to change the words and qualify our food service people, that would cover almost 90% of what we do there. So in that reference, just some quick numbers. So with that, I am done.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Amanda Eason. I'm the business manager in Du Bois. And I do agree with what Mr. Smith had shared. Initially, I had thought, I kind of estimated in my head about $75,000 that would bring in for our small school. And my computer had died, so I went and grabbed it and to do the actual math. And I think we're going to have to do something for small schools. Just like we had to do something for small school minimum teachers earlier this year. So I have 2.25 FTEs for my food service staff. I have a head cook who's full-time. I have an assistant cook who's full-time. And then I have a 0.25 nurse/food service director. So she's 0.25 food service director. I have 189 students this last year. We participate in SNLP, CACFP, and Fresh Food FFP. In 25-26, my gap was about $120,000. So that 75, what I initially thought was 75,000 would not cover for my school district. My expense was 221,000. My revenue was just about 99,000. So I don't know what we do in that situation, but as we know, things impact small schools a little bit differently. So if we did the actual, my third would be about 60,000. So I would be getting about half of my gap.
Just a minute. Yeah. So this is of special interest to me, obviously. So how do we correct that? What would you like us to do?
I don't know how we would correct that. I think it's something, I mean, I've heard from a few different small schools. It's kind of a similar theme. We're the largest of the small schools. So if we did this, I mean, I'm not going to say no to any additional funds that come into my food service program, obviously, but it's not equitable to me, which, you know, in small schools, that's pretty common. So I would only be getting about half of my gap if we did cover the health insurance and the Wyoming retirement. Mm-hmm. It would be about 60,000. Yeah.
Well, Senator, did you have a question? And then Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And obviously, you know, with your numbers, an increase in food prices is probably going to be negligible to the amount of you raised prices with your students and your staff. But have you done that in the?
We
in that
have.
recent-
We have, and I don't know what my actual numbers are, the cost is right now. I don't know what they've set at, but each year we take a look at that. About every 2 years, we make a change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
We'll work it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Justin Ferrantoni, Superintendent of Laramie 2. Just to reiterate, I think we're on to something here. In 2022, there were a handful of districts in the state that were using a vendor for a school lunch program. We were one of them, and our vendor cut out mid-contract because they couldn't afford people or food. So that became our problem. And we've worked extremely hard to build a wonderful lunch program. I'm a lifelong school luncher. I've been eating it ever since I can remember. So it's the culture that I'm used to. I can't get past it. But I think when you have a school lunch program that figures out how to implement a donated lamb into the school lunch program, you've got some good things going on. And I don't want us to discount how great and how hard our lunch people work to make a great lunch program. I can remember being in a school where I had a different color ticket than other kids because of whether I did full pay or not. We work really hard to protect children. Our elementary kids don't have a choice with food.
That's been my concern as well.
Yeah, so I want us to remember that our elementary kids don't have much of a choice. So we do our best to take care of them. I have a school district of about 1,000 students. And the idea of doing the insurance plus the pension doesn't get us to our deficit. Right now, for this past year, we found a way to bring money out of the general fund to the tune of about $237,000 to offset the cost of our school lunch program. If we did the insurance plus the retirement, would be 163. If we were able to cover the staffing as part of that, it would be 288. So in my math, that 30% number that we've been talking about is what it costs for people in our state to run a school lunch program. So things to think about. I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is there another solution you can think of besides the 30% gap, or do you think that'll take care of it in your district as well as the small schools?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, I think there's a lot of, we'll throw around a lot of ideas. I think the scale of our districts across our state have big impacts. And so I think I like the simplicity of what Mr. Smith talked about earlier, but I think it's bigger than just insurance and the retirement for smaller districts. It would be that recognition of an FTE and funding for that. It would also remove any ambiguity in current law for recapture on insurance.
Follow up? Any other questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Co-Chair Committee. I am Mitch Ravelli. I represent Uintah County 6 in Lyman, Wyoming as the business manager. As I'd heard other testimony, wanted to provide our own unique testimony here. We have about 700 students, and as a school district that size comes with its own unique challenges. School lunch simplified, 40% of our revenue for school lunch is subsidized from the general fund. 35% comes from the community in form of lunch payments. 25% will come from participating in the National School Lunch Program. The National School Lunch Program does benefit us 25%. If it was any less, we would consider leaving the National School Lunch Program and attempting to make that up elsewhere. That 25% does help us. I could not imagine trying to do that without it. There's other benefits as mentioned, but I did want to talk about as well our choice to not participate in the CEP program in our elementary. Remember, the percentage used to be 40% to qualify. That is a high level of poverty in any community. 40% is aggressive. That was changed to 25%. We were notified at 26% we could qualify at our elementary school, not the intermediate, not the high school, elementary only. We did the math and, similar to others who testified before, discovered that it would actually cost us more out of the general fund to do the CEP program. And that is because we would no longer be able to collect money from parents for any lunch payments. They could make a donation, but at that point, I don't think you're going to convince parents to make a donation for a daily lunch. So that is why we chose not to participate. 26% is not the sweet spot. I will tell you that for sure. And for us, it made more sense to almost break even between parents and the school lunch program. If we could get into that high 30%, low 40%, we would break even. If you do get to the magic sweet spot, everybody would go for it. You offer free lunch for everybody. It doesn't cost anybody anything. The school district is even. Below that, you're going to subsidize out of your general fund. One word of caution as we look at having folks automatically go to CEP, that would resemble somewhat of a COVID reimbursement for that year. Parents are no longer willing to fill out free and reduced lunch applications at that point. There are other funding mechanisms, such as your at-risk funding, which is a substantial amount of funding in the block grant model that will help your at-risk students. And a lot of schools, it is based on your free and reduced lunch count. If you're only relying on direct certification, that number is much lower than what you get through parents who apply. So as we look at going down that road, if we're not careful, we'll lose other funding mechanisms that would be available to us through other portions of the block grant. So while CEP can be great for some, there's kind of some checks and balances that you have to ensure that you're still fulfilling all the necessary applications and paperwork to not lose that. I do have other numbers prepared, and if you had any questions about our specific school lunch program, I'd be happy to entertain them.
So thank you for your testimony. Maybe I missed it. What's the size of your school?
700.
700. Okay. Any questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Sir.
Chairman Salazar, committee, Shane Ogden, Superintendent, Park County School District 16, but really I want to testify as a kiddo whose mother was a school lunch worker my entire time living with her in our home, and she was a single mother. And I appreciate that this is really a discussion today, not only because we need to feed kids, like I needed to be fed from kindergarten through 12th grade, but also taking care of those that provide that great meal for our kids, that worry about them. I remember in the mornings knocking on the back door, and she'd open it up and give me a peanut butter bar for breakfast. And I appreciate so much those that work in our food services. The one thing I would argue is I don't know that the custodian rate is the right rate for our food workers. I think it should probably be a little bit higher. And that's all I have. Thank you, sir.
You know, I will say this committee is serious about these issues. We are truly searching for solutions that will help. So, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Association of School Administrators. Just wanted to bring a little bit of looking at it from the whole state. And I think one of the biggest issues is the labor costs out there. And I don't have a solution for that. But if I'm Carbon 2 and I have a school, 3 different schools across that place, I can't have a central kitchen. I have to have a kitchen in each one of those schools. They're that far apart. Same with Crook County. I think the same with Laramie 1. They've got schools in different areas. So I think some of it is that economy of scale that you're talking about. And you have to have more people, the more schools you have, especially if they're smaller schools, in my opinion. So I think kind of looking at that, possibly on a school-wide basis rather than a district basis may help us be able to deal with some of that. And with that, I'll take questions.
Any questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Oh, Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you happen to know off the top of your head, what's a typical going rate per hour for a food service worker in a school district?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, I don't have that off the top of my head. That would probably take quite a bit. I know that in the 3 districts that I've worked in, that we competed with different factions. In the 2 large districts, people would go to even fast food at times unless we had wages high enough. In the small district that I worked at, I was a server half the time. So I think it's going to depend on the town that you're in, the economy of each town, and what the workforce need is there.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, if a business manager would want to fill me in, if it's comparable to a para, if it's comparable to working in the drive-through at McDonald's, I'd just like to get a better idea of what we're talking about and how attractive benefits might be.
Mr. Chairman, Jeremy Smith, business manager this time, Sheridan 1. Chairman Salazar and Representative Kelly, in our district, which I think, again, will be very similar for a district whose RCA is at 113. So thinking about that as another component of this, right? Because that's relative across the state as well. A starting cook for us starts at $18 an hour plus benefits. It's not quite, I think McDonald's is offering $20 an hour to start, but no significant benefits, and it's nights and weekends at McDonald's, right? So we try to be sort of in the game in terms of the industry that we're trying to recruit in, but the benefits are a key for us. So.
Mr. Smith, before you leave, how does that compare, that salary, with a janitor?
Oh, great question. So in our district, a custodian will start at $20.25 an hour. Paras will start at 19. Okay. They're close, not perfect. One thing I would mention though, our food service employees are eligible for bonuses based on performance metrics relative to food cost, labor cost, and participation. So we try to incentivize them cooking great meals, using the right amount of food, and et cetera. So in actuality, if you throw in the bonus that they're eligible for, likely they are making more than a custodian.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I think you've heard from a lot of the different people that have testified is that the benefits is a huge draw for a lot of our people. And I would suggest that a family insurance plan is almost as much as we pay them per year. So that's something to keep in mind from what Mr. Smith, I guess Dr. Smith, he got increased today. So just food for thought again. And again, I don't have an answer. Would be happy to work on it though.
Scott Stoltz, Superintendent District 2 in Sheridan, just to provide you some exacting numbers regarding the larger school district, because I know you've not necessarily heard testimony on how that would impact us. So the question regarding hourly rate, so our head kitchen supervisor is currently at $19.98. If they're at the junior high or the high school, they're going to be at $20.98. Whereas a head custodian, they would be at $20.79. Or if they were at the junior high or the high school, if they were at the high school, they'd be $23.79. And at the junior high, they would be at $22.25 is what that would look like.
specific to how does this impact a larger school district, if you will. So the exacting numbers that we have is our food service budget is 2.419 million. And 1.147 million is salaries. If we look just at benefits, that's only 200,000, I shouldn't say only, but it's $200,000. So if we were looking just at providing insurance for our employees in the food service for a large school district, that would not get us there because we were in the red about $500,000. Whereas if we looked at the third model, 1/3 of covering that cost, that would absolutely put us right where we would need to be. We would actually be a little bit in the black. So at least that's how it impacts a large school district. Certainly, again, knowing that you've heard testimony from a variety of different sizes, but that's how it would at least impact a school district of about 3,500 kids. Regarding how you could, yes, if in fact we looked at, I know Senator Rothfuss brought up the point about 1/3, would that be more aligned to having to then be more closely to being in the black? The answer for our school district is yes.
Very helpful. Yes,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stoltz, a quick question for you, and I'd like to have also asked this question. I didn't think about it at the time for the gentleman from Lyman. How many meals do you folks produce in the course of a year? If we do the math and divide that out, what is your actual labor costs per meal when we look at this as a breakdown of a total number of meals? I mean, when you're looking at this, just curiously as I'm listening to this, do you have any of those numbers that might be available to give us an idea of your labor costs per meal served or created? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, Speaker Nyman, I don't have those numbers. I certainly can run them for certain. It looks like the business manager from Lyman is able to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Speaker. We did a study on our cost per meal for the 24-25 school year to evaluate to raise our prices. We'd come up with an average between $6 and $7 cost per meal, depending on what it was. Some meals are a little bit more expensive. We factored those in. So generally between $6 and $7.50 this year is our average cost per meal currently.
Follow up, sir?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and what percentage of that is labor? When you divide that into what you're paying for your labor costs, what is it costing per meal to provide labor? Retirement, insurance, salary, just kind of broke down. What is that percentage, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. Our labor is inclusive of salary and benefits, and it is about 60% labor, 40% food cost.
Thank you, sir. Very good. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's impressive off your head, top of your head there.
We did it, Mr. Chair, we did have to study that to analyze our, we were going to increase our food costs and go to our community with that. So we wanted to make sure that we had our homework done to not misspeak on those.
Well, you get an 8 today.
Yeah. I was prepared for once. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good afternoon. I'm Colton Pollard. I'm the business manager for Fremont 25. And I just wanted to give some of our numbers. Our ADM is around 2,200. We are going to get a charter school supposedly next year. So those are going to decrease significantly, probably. So our food service worker, we start them out at $16.50 compared to ground and maintenance. We start at $22. Food service cook lead is $17.50. Production cook is $18.50, and our food service kitchen manager is $20.50. So even the manager is less than what we would hire a maintenance or a custodian. Our daily sales that we collect for the food service is $240,000. Our catering that we do for our community is $46,000, and then what we've received from federal is $793,000. So that's about $1,080,000 that we collect. Our salaries are half of that, $510,000. Benefits $272,000, and our food costs are around $590,000, and there's some supplies mixed in there as well. So that leaves us in the hole about $360,000. Our benefits were $272,000. So if we did have the benefits included in the FTE, it wouldn't break us even, but it would bring us pretty close.
It would make it manageable.
It would make it manageable. That is given that if we don't give the food service workers any raises this last year. So this was what we ended at the 2026. Given that we have given everyone else raises, our teachers, our paras, we tried to give our food service workers a raise as well. So that 1650 is what it was. They're now going to be making 1750 just because we also increased our health insurance to everyone. We are matching what the state does. So our health insurance costs increased for everyone in the district. And not everyone in the district received the raises the teachers did. So we were trying to try to get the food service workers in a comparable wage over the next few years if we can afford it. But yes, that would make it manageable given that we're not giving raises, but we are going to try to give some raises.
Yes, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One cost of labor we know is turnover and training. How well is your district doing at retaining people so there's not a lot of turnover within food services?
Surprisingly, giving the raises we haven't had a whole lot of turnover with our food service. We are about to because we're going to have 5 or 6 people that are going to retire, but we've actually been able to maintain it. But that's primarily due to our food service director. They love her and we do really well there. So we haven't had a whole lot of turnover with that. Actually, not as much as maintenance, to be honest.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank
Yep.
you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Please.
Carla Banks, WDE. And just to answer your question about turnover, in the state for our food service directors, in August, we'll have over half of our food service directors new within the last 3 years. So the turnover and the training is a lot.
Thank you. Please bring them on. Okay, good to have you. Are you able to hear me? Hello? I think you're muted. Still muted. Nope, not yet. It's what?
Yeah, so we can hear her, or she can be heard by her microphone.
Well, we can work it out.
Want me to say it out loud? 3, 4.
Well, let's improvise. If you can talk in a relatively slow manner so we can read, then you can still get your message across to the committee. Go for it.
No.
But I do have to read it.
Not come through. Oh, it's not showing up, so it is her microphone.
I think it might be
Lindsay, do you have multiple microphones connected to your computer?
And she just found the other one. Or earbuds, headset. Car in the parking lot.
Can you hear me now?
Yay.
Oh, excellent. Okay. My name is Lindsay Adam. I am a teacher in Pinedale. I've been a teacher for the last 16 years here. And I've also taught briefly in the Seattle area in Washington. And I wanted to add sort of the student/client perspective to school lunch and how it's changed over the last almost 2 decades. When I first started in the Seattle area, granted they're very close to import places, we had great selection of fresh food. Every day there was, like if it was hamburger day, you could still tell there was the bun had some kind of grains in it. There'd always be fresh spring mix to put on that or on the side as a salad, lots of chopped options to put on the side. When I moved to Big Piney, you could tell there was a marked difference. Everything felt very straight from the freezer and ready to go, not at all very healthy and not fresh at all. That was in 2010. And then when the federal guidelines started to come out to really help combat the obesity issues in a lot of places, and that really changed the school drastically. And I'm not involved in our food services here in Pinedale, so I can't say for sure how much federal funding we use. If we don't use it, it seems like we do use it because as I've gone through, even as a customer, I'm told I have to take so much of this or that. I can't refuse things. Overall, the food is extremely dry and tasteless. Everything has to have a certain amount of whole wheat. And I love food. I am not very picky, but the whole wheat versions of whatever our school can afford is very dry, hard to swallow. We have to serve vegetables. We're served like raw carrots, raw zucchini, and no dressing, nothing to dip it in at all. So it's not things that I as an adult would ever choose to eat that way. And I saw also a big change when kids weren't allowed to go back for seconds. So I know in a lot of places they're worried about obesity, but at least in Pinedale, even though we don't all live in a ranch, we have a lot of scrawny ranch kids. And it was hard for them when they couldn't go back for seconds. But at the same time, there's also an immense amount of food waste because they have to take things they don't want to take. So that's what I see as sort of the client side. And my kids do complain quite often about the food and not wanting to eat it. Our high school has an open campus option. And I think I would estimate still 25 to 30% of students still opt to stay and eat the lunch, probably because it's partially paid for. And as far as paying our food service workers, I don't know how much they make exactly. I don't know how it compares to custodians, although I know for sure custodians make more just because they get more hours and they work year round. So I do know some people that have switched from working in the food to being a custodian just to have more hours to work. My guess is that our food service workers are paid very similar to our paras, which is pretty low, 15 to 16 an hour. Doesn't even compete with starting wages for teenagers working part-time. But they do it for the benefits and the wages because you cannot get the benefits. You can't get those benefits at any other place in town here. And that was just a few things I wanted to throw in. I also had quite a few comments this morning on implementation, but I understand if now is not the time for that. And with that, I stand and yield for questions.
Well, I can't wait to try my federal food tomorrow during lunch. So.
Yes, you should. I've probably had it 5 times in the last 8 years. If I forget my lunch, I will just go hungry.
I'll let you know how it goes. So questions, Mr. Co-Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear, you're with an open campus, you've got 25% that stay and 75% go off campus to eat lunch?
I think it's very hard it might be a little higher than that because we don't have any fast food. They can walk to the grocery store. They only get 25 minutes for a turnaround. We share our cafeteria between the middle school and the high school. So there is only about 10 minutes for the high school kids to eat in the cafeteria. for that reason, they often opt to take it to go and just eat on the floor in the hallways of the school. So it's kind of hard to count how many people are staying. It could be more than 25 to 30. But a lot of kids that if they have a friend with a car, they're just going to buy Doritos or whatever at a local place. I would say the majority that do eat school lunch every day are the ones that like have free and reduced lunch. And so that's what they can afford.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Thank you. Who else would like to testify? Public comment. We are all eager to hear any comments. Okay. Well, we have a full day tomorrow. Matt, any thoughts? Anything you'd like to share?
Mr. Chairman, just tomorrow, to reminder, technology will be the first item up for discussion, and then we'll finish up with the student activity funding. And then we'll await any committee directives that you wish to provide staff and its consultants. So we do reconvene at 8 a.m. rather than 8:30. That's just a reminder. So just a little bit earlier start time.
Thank you. The smaller schools, particularly maybe Du Bois, but any small school, I would encourage you as soon as we adjourn, if you want, to connect with Dr. Pikus. He's going to be obviously coming in the coming weeks with possible options, and I think it would be constructive for you to, for just a moment or two, share again your individual situations. And I think that might help in the equation of what we may hear in the coming weeks. So just throw that out there for anyone willing to do that. With that, we will adjourn until 8 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.